Hi, my name is Matt Benson-Parry, and I'm here this week to discuss with you the Topic 2 review, the primary text being Inclusion in Action, written by Ian Dempsey and edited by Phil Foreman, and presented by myself and Jack Noonan. So the opening paragraph of this chapter suggests that, like all day-to-day behaviour, our teaching practice is a reflection of our beliefs, our obligation to law, and workplace requirements. In education, this is what we choose to teach to a student, and our pedagogy, legislation, and organisational policy, or the relationship between principles, legislation, policies, and practice. And so this chapter, and indeed the whole book, is about how best to apply that functionality to students with additional needs in the classroom, and about offering practical advice for that end. The chapter then talks about the relationship of principles to practice, and how this ties in with previous chapters of the book, and how this ultimately is reflective of our values as a society, espousing the concept of social justice. Social justice is a satisfactory account of human justice, which requires recognising the equal citizenship of people with impairments, including mental impairments, and appropriately supporting the labour. The chapter describes in broad strokes the way that superficially similar societies, such as the UK and the US, adjust their policies, although I can't help but think that a better comparable in terms of population, density, and history of Aboriginal rights would have been Canada. Intriguingly, though, the US does recognise poor behaviour in students as a form of disability, and additionally includes families in payments to support the equitable education of children with disabilities. Perhaps this would work well in Australia, as poor behaviour in students would theoretically not require a medical diagnosis and could open inroads for help in families where help is required, but there is nothing medically wrong. As the chapter moves on to talk about the increase of diagnoses in Australia, it offers up two possible explanations for a very sizable increase in students with disabilities entering regular classrooms rather than segregation classrooms between 1996 and 2003. The first is that there has been a population shift in regular classrooms, but as the population of segregation classrooms stays remarkably constant, this seems unlikely. The second explanation is that the incidence of diagnoses has risen, and this is likely because there has been more research conducted in the last couple of decades, leading to a greater awareness of disability in the education sector, and thus an increase in the number of children diagnosed with a disability. I'm not sure that this properly explains the singularly huge leap in the Northern Territory. My thoughts are that maybe this is actually an increase in children listed as English with a second language. On a related note, the Northern Territory has been trialling new approaches to teacher classrooms that maintain Indigenous language while delivering a comprehensive education, promoting resilience in both the children and the broader community, and seeing gratifying results in students achieving Year 12 graduation in record numbers. If anyone is interested, please look up Gunbalanya School in Arnhem Land. You can see the spelling down the bottom there. We get to the part of the chapter that talks about key players in the process of inclusion, and these would include teachers, parents, academics, lobby groups, media, and politicians. An ongoing debate amongst these groups is about the place of segregated classes in contemporary Australian education. The general consensus and point of this book is that segregation of any kind impacts on the rights of the child to be educated in a regular class alongside regular children. In theory, each child would be assessed for their individual level of ability and then helped according to their individual need, with a heavy usage of support staff and supplemental teachers. The arguments in favour of the inclusionists: firstly, there is a single body of children requiring education as opposed to abled and disabled, and that all children have requirements along a continuum of need, and therefore all children should be schooled together under the aegis and responsibility of the regular school system. Secondly, there is the argument of efficiency, and that by segregating classes there is needless double up of resources that could be better allocated. A single system catering for all needs also ensures the curriculum is met comprehensively and uniformly across the continuum of student needs. Thirdly, that segregation leads to the development of inappropriate attitudes and beliefs and the invisibility of disability. It may also lead teachers to believe that they would be incapable of teaching disabled children despite the fundamental concepts of education remaining the same across the continuum of needs. Finally, segregation is arguably discriminatory and cannot be readily justified on the basis of equality or equity. It is a fundamentally unjust system that does not endeavour, with due support as dictated by the continuum of need, to include disability in regular classrooms and create meaningful experiences for disabled students. So then there are arguments against inclusion and in favour of segregation, and these revolve around, firstly, the historical inability of regular classrooms to meet the needs of disabled children, and that segregated education grew as an answer to that inability. Secondly, that inclusionist arguments are too philosophical and too illogical in practice, especially for students with severe behavioural issues. Thirdly, that there have been a concordant increase in school violence alongside the greater integration of behaviourally disabled children in mainstream classes, both in regards to violent assaults and with weapons. Fourthly, that pressure from media has resulted in the release of some information that was previously kept confidential. And finally, emotive concerns from parents and caregivers at the prospect of their child's special class or school being closed. The chapter moves on from this to provide examples of state, national, and international bodies associated with inclusion, including defining what inclusion is and what it is not. So, strategy is, of course, crucial to the success of any student, and inclusion is modified by a given school and a number of component factors. You can see. Ultimately, inclusion is about acting ethically within a consideration of your actions or the actions of your school and the moral concern for your students' success, experience, and your own belief in affirmative action. The author uses the following statement from UNESCO. So, we should understand that the writing of a code is the start, and each teacher should feel an ownership of inclusion policy, and the policy must be reinforced and supported by management in order for it to be effective. Thank you.